The palace staff are absolutely losing it, practically begging for their lives. Nathan isn't making things any easier with that icy stare. Conrad is just trying to stay out of the splash zone while his boss is fuming. The Emperor looks like he's about to drop a heavy sentence on someone. Suddenly, he grabs Arianel's arm and everyone in the room freezes. Conrad looks like he's about to faint from the pure stress of the situation. Arianel is caught completely off guard as the tyrant looms right over her. Nathan just reaches out and clamps his hand over her mouth to shut her up. He's giving her a look that says he's officially done with her talking. They stay locked in that high-tension standoff for a long beat. He leans in way too close, trying to intimidate her into submission. Arianel is sweating, but she's doing her best to maintain her professional mode. He finally lets go, but the vibe in the room is still incredibly hostile. Those red eyes are enough to give anyone nightmares. Instead of cowering, Arianel actually grabs his arm and starts shouting back. Nathan is genuinely stunned that she's still got the nerve to argue with him. She keeps her head high, refusing to let him see how much she's shaking inside. They start walking through the palace, but the silence between them is deafening. Arianel keeps pushing her point, determined to make him see reason. She has to practically run just to keep up with his long strides. Nathan looks like he's 5 seconds away from losing his temper. He stops and looks down at her, his expression as cold as ever. He narrows his eyes, clearly trying to read her mind. Back in his private room, Nathan stands by his throne with his arms crossed. Arianel stands her ground, even when he's radiating pure tyrant energy. The pressure of the moment is clearly starting to get to her. Nathan just stares at her, probably trying to figure out if she's brave or just crazy. Her hands are trembling as she tries to find the right words to save herself. Finally, she just lets out a frustrated shout, done with the mind games. For Nathan, everyone else's thoughts are just noisy trash he has to sift through. He remembers being a kid and realizing that nobody, not even his family, could be trusted. Arianel sees that look of isolation in his eyes, and her heart softens. Nathan looks away, clearly bothered by the shift in her emotions. She takes a deep breath, deciding to go for broke with her next move. The Emperor gives her a smug little grin, thinking he's finally won. Arianel waits for him to get within range, her expression perfectly calm. She reaches out, closing the distance between them in a split second. She ignores every survival instinct she has and steps right into his space. Before he can even process what's happening, she pulls him into a hug. She holds him tight, pulling his head down to her chest to block out the world. Arianel talks to him gently, treating him like a person instead of a monster. Nathan is completely paralyzed, shocked by the sudden, peaceful silence in his head. Arianel looks down at the Emperor, her eyes filled with a mix of surprise and pity. They're still in the throne room, surrounded by an overwhelming silence that feels heavy. She keeps her gaze steady, acting as if pulling a tyrant into a hug is just another part of her job. Nathan is completely buried in her embrace, his usual guard totally gone. He looks up at her, dazed, his expression softening in a way that's almost unrecognizable. Arianel gives him a gentle, reassuring smile, trying to keep the mood light. The atmosphere in the room shifts as the tension finally starts to drain away. Nathan's face is a mask of confusion and quiet relief as he processes the silence. Arianel is still lost in her thoughts, wondering how she even survived that encounter. She reflects on her own actions, feeling like a complete idiot for taking such a massive gamble. She thinks back to the rumors of the Saintess and how she's just trying to prove she's not the one. Nathan stands with his back to her, lost in a memory of a future he might have imagined. He remembers a vision of Crystal reaching out to him, a rare moment of connection. Arianel's mental landscape is so different from everyone else's, and it's clearly affecting him. He turns away, the weight of his responsibilities returning to his shoulders. A magic circle starts to glow behind him, radiating a strange and powerful energy. Nathan suddenly pulls her close, his expression intense as he searches her eyes. Arianel gasps, completely caught off guard by the sudden move. He reaches out and grabs her wrist. His grip firm but not painful. He looms over her, his eyes searching hers for some kind of truth. Nathan adjusts his coat, looking like he's trying to regain his composure. He leans in even closer, the tension between them reaching a breaking point. Arianel freezes, her heart pounding as she waits for his next move. Nathan lets go of her arm, but the intensity in his gaze hasn't faded. Down the hall, Conrad is accompanying little Princess Crystal, who looks incredibly upset. Crystal is screaming, her face red with frustration and anger. Nathan's red eye narrows as he senses a sudden surge of magical energy. Arianel looks on in shock, her eyes wide as the scene unfolds. The power radiating from Crystal is blinding, filling the entire room with light. Nathan picks Arianel up and starts running toward the source of the blast. He holds her close, his focus entirely on getting her away from the danger. The magical energy is everywhere, swirling around them in a chaotic storm. Nathan shields Arianel with his own body, his expression grim and determined. Arianel looks up at him, realizing the lengths he's going to protect her. He keeps his arms wrapped around her, his breath hitched from the exertion. He checks her for injuries, his voice surprisingly soft as he asks if she's all right. They're both a bit of a mess, their clothes torn and their hair disheveled. Nathan looks down at his ruined suit, but he doesn't seem to care about the mess. Arianel is blushing furiously, her hands covering her face in embarrassment. She steals a glance at him, her mind racing with a million different thoughts. She looks like she's about to say something, but she's just too overwhelmed. Nearby, Crystal is still in the middle of her awakening, her power continuing to flare. Earlier that day, the palace was bathed in a strange golden light. Nathan sat alone in a daze, his shirt torn from the sudden surge of power. Arianel looked down at her own ruined dress, her mind racing to process what had just happened. She remembered reaching out to Crystal, trying to steady the young girl's overflowing magic. The two of them had walked together through the palace grounds, oblivious to the coming storm. Now, Arianel could only watch in silence, her heart heavy with a growing sense of worry. Nathan watched her closely, his expression unreadable despite the chaos that surrounded them. They sat together on the floor, the silence between them thick and uncomfortable. Arianel reached out to him, her hand trembling as she gently touched his arm. She watched him with concern, wondering what was going through the Emperor's mind. Crystal looked on, her eyes wide with fear as the magical aura around her began to intensify once again. Conrad arrived on the scene, his usual calm composure replaced by a look of deep distress. He quickly took charge, directing the palace staff to clear the area and prepare for an emergency. Arianel stood up, her eyes fixed on the unfolding situation with a new sense of purpose. She turned to Nathan, her expression a mix of desperation and quiet resolve. Conrad spoke urgently to the guards, his voice echoing through the long corridor. He looked back at Arianel, his face etched with worry for the young princess and the future of the empire. Crystal stood alone in the doorway, a small and fragile figure against the backdrop of the massive palace. The three of them stood together, a fragile alliance formed in the face of the unknown. Nathan towered over them, his presence both intimidating and oddly protective. He looked down, his eyes filled with a weariness that went far beyond mere physical exhaustion. Crystal clenched her small fists, her frame shaking with the effort to control the magic within her. Arianel watched her with a heavy heart, wishing there was more she could do to ease the girl's burden. A brilliant, golden light began to emanate from Crystal, pulsing with a life of its own. The power within her was awakening, a force that both terrified and fascinated everyone present. Nathan's muscles tensed as he felt the surge of energy, his torn clothes a testament to its raw strength. Arianel gasped as the ground beneath them began to tremble, the palace itself reacting to the magic. Nathan kept a watchful eye on Crystal, ready to intervene if the situation became too dangerous. Arianel gripped his arm tighter, seeking some small measure of comfort in his presence. Conrad and the other staff could only watch from a distance, helpless to stop the inevitable. Arianel pointed toward the source of the magical disturbance, her voice barely a whisper. Nathan's gaze followed her lead, his expression hardening as he realized the severity of the crisis. The palace staff were in a state of absolute panic, fleeing the area as quickly as their legs could carry them. Arianel knew she had to stay strong for Crystal's sake, no matter how much she wanted to run away. She looked at Nathan, her eyes pleading for him to take control of the situation. He reached out and grabbed her hand, his grip firm and reassuring in the midst of the chaos. Crystal looked up at them, her eyes filled with a mixture of awe and pure, childlike wonder. Arianel let out a hysterical laugh, the overwhelming tension of the last few moments finally breaking. Far below, the palace gardens remained a picture of perfect, unmoving peace and tranquility. A group of high priests made their way toward the palace, their faces solemn and filled with determination. One of them stopped and looked up at the sky, his eyes filled with a sudden sense of foreboding. Suddenly, the entire palace was bathed in a blinding light, the power of the awakening reaching its peak. The priest stood frozen in shock, his eyes wide with disbelief as he felt the overwhelming surge of power emanating from within the palace walls. Arianel is completely thrown off by what she's seeing. A glowing yellow orb is zipping around, and Crystal is trying to catch it. Nathan just stands there with his arms crossed, looking ready to snap at any second. Arianel realizes it's not just some weird light, it's an actual spirit. Nathan demands an explanation, but Arianel is still trying to process the fact that magic is real. She's sweating, knowing one wrong word could end with her head on a platter. Crystal watches as the little spirit, Rue, starts to look a bit sad, mirroring the tension in the room. Arianel tries to wave it off like it's nothing, putting on her best professional face to distract the Emperor. Even the servants, Conrad and Leslie, are baffled as more copies of the spirit start popping up around them. Arianel decides she needs to take charge before things get out of hand. Nathan looks like he's about to lose his cool. Crystal doesn't seem bothered at all, reaching out to the little orb floating in front of her. Arianel forces a smile, trying to act like everything is perfectly normal. Crystal looks up, sensing her father's growing irritation. Arianel stands her ground, shifting into mode to handle the difficult client in front of her. Nathan starts to walk away, but he's clearly still fuming. The servants are frozen with fear as the Emperor looms over them. Nathan's hand drops to his sword hilt. He draws his blade, and Arianel immediately steps in front of the servants to shield them. Nathan is ready to deal with the witnesses who saw too much. Leslie is absolutely terrified, covering her mouth to keep from screaming. She's shaking, while Conrad tries to keep it together behind her. Arianel shouts for him to stop, not caring how dangerous he is. She faces him head-on, refusing to let him hurt innocent people. Meanwhile, back in her home kingdom, a group of religious officials gather to plot her downfall. Nathan looks like he's heard enough. Arianel's expression softens for a second, realizing how much pressure he's actually under. He snaps at her, his patience finally snapping. Conrad is in a total panic, watching the Empress talk back to a tyrant. Arianel stands firm, shielding the staff with her own body. Nathan holds his sword ready, waiting for her next move. She yells right back at him, calling out his cruelty. Nathan is visibly stunned that anyone would actually dare to raise their voice at him. The servants watch from the side, unable to believe what they're seeing. Arianel isn't done. She's taking full advantage of their contract. She grabs his arm, catching him off guard with the sudden touch. She explains that Leslie and Conrad are loyal and hardworking, and she won't let him kill them. Nathan gives her a dark look, clearly not used to being told what to do. She points at his shredded clothes, using it as an excuse to get him under her control for a makeover. She takes a deep breath and prepares for her next move. She places a firm hand on his shoulder. Nathan is completely silenced by her touch. Crystal watches with hope, seeing her new mother finally getting through to him. Nathan stands there, stiff as a board, while Arianel leans in close. Little Crystal is trying her best not to peek, but she's failing miserably while Rue zips around them. Arianel takes a deep breath, trying to keep her professional stylist mode engaged even though her heart is racing. Nathan's hands are hovering near her, looking like he's not sure whether to push her away or pull her closer. Arianel suddenly points an accusing finger at him, calling him a heartless monster for whatever cold thing he just said in front of his daughter. He just stares back, looking more annoyed than actually hurt by her words. Arianel pauses, the air between them suddenly feeling way too heavy. And then, it happens, the spirit Rue forces them together, and their lips actually meet. It's a total shock to both of them, and for a second, the world just stops. Nathan's hand reaches up to cradle her head, and the tension shifts from angry to something else entirely. Back in the real world, Leslie and Conrad are absolutely losing it at the sight. But the mood is broken as Nathan pulls away, drawing his sword in a flash of silver. He leans back in for a moment, the heat between them still palpable. Conrad and Crystal are stuck watching the most awkward domestic dispute ever. Crystal is turning a bright shade of red, while the staff looks like they'd rather be literally anywhere else. Leslie quickly covers the princess's eyes, trying to save her from seeing any more of this drama. Arianel pushes back, her hands flat against his chest as Nathan stands there with his shirt torn and a look of pure confusion. She lets him have it, her face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and genuine frustration. Nathan looks away, his red eyes dulling as he tries to process what just happened. Conrad steps in, looking like the only adult in the room, while Arianel tries to compose herself. Meanwhile, far away in the Silva Kingdom, Princess Ruby is living a very different life. A man with glasses watches from the balcony as the blonde-haired princess poses in the garden. She flashes a perfect, practiced smile, but there's a sharp edge to it. This man, Archbishop Andre, watches her closely, his expression unreadable behind his spectacles. They walk through the palace gardens together, looking like the picture of nobility. Ruby stops and looks back, her mind clearly already spinning with plans to deal with her sister. She's been living in Arianel's shadow for way too long, and she's ready to change that. A white bird lands on her finger as she chats with Andre, looking every bit the delicate saintess. They sit down for tea, the atmosphere thick with secrets. Ruby takes a sip, her eyes cold as she listens to the Archbishop's report. Andre sits across from her, his movements precise and professional. She shows him a book, her smile never reaching her eyes as they plot their next move. She's heard rumors about the new Empress, and she's not happy about her sister's sudden success. They continue their quiet conversation, tucked away from prying ears. Everything is being set in motion for the upcoming festival. But to understand why Nathan is the way he is, you have to look back at the day it all fell apart. A younger Crystal stands by a coffin, her tiny face drenched in tears. A younger, even more unhinged Nathan is losing his mind, grabbing a priest by the throat in the middle of the funeral. He blames them for what happened, his rage overflowing in a room full of mourners. That was the day the tyrant was truly born, walking away from the light and into the shadows. Conrad watched him even then, seeing the man he served crumble under the weight of his grief. Ever since then, Nathan has been a man alone, surrounded by people but completely isolated in his own mind. Nathan stands tall in the corridor, the weight of his empire and his secrets heavy on his shoulders. He walks past his loyal aide, both lost in thoughts of a past that still haunts them. Placing a hand on Conrad's shoulder, Nathan admits his greatest regret, failing to protect his close friend, Cora. Conrad looks down, his heart aching for the woman he couldn't save and the child she left behind. In his study, Nathan stares at the paperwork, but his mind is elsewhere, consumed by the shadows of the past. His red eyes narrow as he senses something new, a presence that doesn't fit the usual filth in this palace. Back in the bedroom, the tension is sky high as Nathan stands with his shirt half torn from their earlier struggle. Arianel stands her ground, refusing to be intimidated by his raw power and exposed chest. Conrad is absolutely floored, his jaw dropping at the sight of the Emperor being manhandled by a stylist. Arianel doesn't seem to notice his shock, her eyes fixed firmly on the Emperor as she makes her point. For a split second, they both remember that accidental kiss, the heat, the shock, and the way the world seemed to stop. Nathan snaps out of it, turning his face away to hide the blush he'd never admit to having. Rue, the little spirit, is having none of it, puffing up its cheeks as if ready to scold the Emperor itself. Arianel looks on, her expression softening as she realizes how much work this family needs. Crystal watches the spirit curiously, feeling a spark of joy she hasn't felt in a very long time. Nathan's gaze is fixed on Arianel, trying to read the thoughts she's keeping so perfectly hidden. Arianel crosses her arms, looking every bit the professional mother figure as she lectures the Emperor. He just listens, his stoic expression hiding the fact that he's actually paying attention to her words. Rue floats near Crystal, a glowing ball of support as Arianel continues her righteous crusade. She's on a roll now, her stylist mode shifting into a fierce guardian mode for the young princess. She gets right in his face, her shouting echoing through the chamber as she calls him out for his coldness. Nathan is completely blindsided, his mind reeling as he thinks she's far too adorable when she's angry. He looks at Crystal, seeing the poor thing in a new light through Arianel's eyes. Little Crystal just beams, practically glowing with happiness at having someone finally stand up for her. Arianel takes a moment to breathe, her face still flushed with the intensity of her lecture. Again, that image of them together flashes in their minds a moment of raw intimacy they can't quite escape. The memory of his lips against hers is so vivid, it makes her ears turn bright red. Nathan is still close, his hand resting near her as he processes the overwhelming purity of her thoughts. She looks up at him, her eyes wide as she realizes the Emperor might actually be listening for once. She beams at him, her smile bright enough to chase away even his deepest shadows. Nathan crosses his arms and relents. I don't mind. Do as you like with the girl and the palace. Overjoyed, Arianel pulls Crystal into a warm hug, promising to protect her until the very end. Conrad watches from the side, a small smile playing on his lips as he sees the first signs of warmth in this cold palace. Arianel is determined. She will use her knowledge and her skills to ensure this story has a happy ending. Meanwhile, in the shadows, Ruby and Andre are already plotting their next move against the new Empress. Nathan looks away, his hand on his neck as he tries to ignore the fluttering in his own heart. Arianel is back to her cheerful self, ready to take on whatever challenges the palace throws her way. They continue their conversation, the atmosphere in the room having shifted from hostile to strangely domestic. Suddenly, a loud thudding sound echoes from the other side of the heavy bedroom doors. Nathan turns his head, his sharp eyes narrowing, as his tyrant instincts immediately kick back in. He stands his ground, ready to deal with any intruder who dares to interrupt this fragile peace. Arianel quickly grabs Crystal's hand, shielding the young princess as they face the unknown threat outside. The heavy doors burst open as a high-ranking official storms in, his face contorted in a mix of fury and righteous indignation. Nathan doesn't even stand. He remains seated on his throne, shielding Arianel and Crystal with his presence as the intruders confront them. Conrad stands between the Emperor and the shouting courtiers, his expression a mask of professional calm despite the chaos. Arianel's thoughts briefly drift back to her former life, the face of a kind woman she once knew, a stark contrast to the venom in this room. She places a reassuring hand on Nathan's shoulder, sensing his rising temper and wordlessly urging him to stay calm for Crystal's sake. Once the intruders are dismissed, Arianel watches as servants scramble to repair the damage caused by the Emperor's brief but terrifying display of power. The room falls silent again, leaving Arianel and Nathan to process the fact that they are now, for better or worse, a team. Behind the scenes, the shadows of the past still linger, a ghostly reminder of the grief and duty that Conrad carries on his shoulders. Nathan looks away, his hand tracing his jawline as he wonders why he allowed this woman to get so close to him. Arianel doesn't let him retreat into his shell, leaning in to explain her plan for Crystal's upcoming transformation. Even in chibi form, their dynamic is clear. She's the unstoppable force, and he's the increasingly bewildered object. To her absolute shock, Nathan sweeps both her and Crystal off their feet, carrying them with effortless, terrifying strength. Arianel can hardly believe it. The tyrant is playing the hero, even if his expression remains as cold and stiff as ever. She finds herself clinging to him, her heart racing as she realizes there's more to this man than the rumors ever suggested. The defeated official can only watch in shock as the Emperor walks away, completely ignoring the court's protocol for the sake of his contract mother. Work begins immediately in the dressing room, where the palace's finest fabrics and most skilled maids are put to work under Arianel's direction. No detail is too small for a celebrity stylist. Every ribbon and every stitch must be perfect for the princess's new look. The result is breathtaking. Crystal looks like a true royal, and Arianel radiates elegance in her new gown as they stand beside a dapper-looking Nathan. Arianel lets out a joyous laugh, her professional mask finally slipping to reveal the genuine happiness she feels in her new role. She turns to the maids, her eyes sparkling as she prepares to lead her clients into their new life, leaving the shadows of the past behind. Arianel and Nathan wait in the dressing room for the big reveal. Crystal slowly steps out, looking like a totally different person in her new dress. The transformation is so cute, it actually hurts Arianel's heart. Arianel waits for Nathan's reaction, but the guy is just staring. Nathan crosses his arms, looking as unimpressed as ever. But Crystal doesn't care, she's absolutely beaming. Arianel gives him her best "I told you so" smile. Crystal looks up at her father, waiting for a single compliment. She practically skips over to him, full of energy. Nathan looks away, clearly feeling awkward about the whole situation. The little princess pauses, her excitement fading just a bit. They all sit down together, though the tension is still there. Arianel starts laying out the next steps for the makeover. She reaches out to adjust Nathan's hair, catching him off guard. The servants in the background look like they're about to faint. One of the maids holds onto the fabric, watching the Empress closely. Nathan lets it happen, even though he looks like he'd rather be anywhere else. Arianel is in full professional mode, her mind racing with ideas. She starts imagining Crystal in every possible royal outfit. The stylist's brain is working overtime, pairing fabrics and jewels. She even envisions Nathan looking like a proper, well-groomed emperor. Arianel makes a final adjustment to Crystal's sleeve. Finally, they sit down for a celebratory tea and cake. Crystal happily digs in, her new dress sparkling in the light. Nathan watches his daughter eat, his expression softening for once. Arianel tries to strike up a conversation, but he's still a tough nut to crack. Crystal starts nodding off right at the table. Arianel catches her before she faceplants into the cake. She looks down at the sleeping girl with a gentle smile. The little princess is completely tuckered out from all the excitement. Nathan steps in and reaches for his daughter. He picks her up with surprising care, holding her close. He carries her back to her room and lays her down. Arianel follows him, watching the scene from the doorway. Nathan walks out without saying a word, leaving them behind. Crystal wakes up just enough to grab her favorite stuffed bunny. Arianel looks at the child, realizing how much work she still has to do. She stands by the bed, thinking about the upcoming festival. She leans in and tells Crystal that everything is going to be okay. Crystal looks a bit confused, but she trusts her new mother. Arianel points toward the air, her eyes lighting up. Suddenly, the spirit Rue appears, floating right above Crystal's head. Arianel has a mini crisis thinking back to her past life as a top stylist. Crystal looks down shyly, clutching her bunny plushie while Rue floats nearby. The Empress claps her hands, trying to keep the positive energy up for the little one. She gently pets Rue, the glowing spirit, as Crystal watches with wide eyes. Arianel sits on the edge of the bed, finally starting to feel like a real mother. She realizes that this kid just needs someone to actually care about her. Crystal points at the floating ball of light, curious about what it really is. The Empress holds up a tiny dress, already planning the next major makeover. But Nathan is just sitting on his throne, looking like he's about to lose his mind. Arianel tucks the princess into bed, making sure she's comfortable. She catches a glimpse of her own reflection, noticing a determined look in her eyes. Crystal beams, looking absolutely angelic with Rue hovering around her. Down the hall, the maids are whispering and looking terrified as usual. One of them starts lecturing Crystal, probably about her messy room or something. The poor girl looks like she's about to burst into tears again. The headmaid looks shocked when she realizes Arianel is watching them. Crystal peeks out from under the covers, still clutching her bunny. Arianel leans in close, making sure the princess feels safe. She starts brushing the girl's hair, her professional instincts kicking in. But she stops, looking off to the side as if sensing something is wrong. She remembers how Crystal was treated before she got here. It wasn't pretty. Crystal looks at her new mother, wondering if this is all too good to be true. The Empress keeps up her gentle act, whispering sweet nothings to calm her down. Crystal finally starts to drift off, feeling truly peaceful for the first time. Arianel looks at her with a soft, genuine smile. She gently strokes the girl's face, promising to protect her no matter what. Crystal is out cold, finally getting the sleep she needs. Meanwhile, Nathan is back in his office, buried in paperwork. He's scribbling away, but he looks like he hasn't slept in a week. His aide, Conrad, walks in and notices the Emperor is in a mood. Conrad adjusts his glasses, ready to deliver some probably bad news. Nathan looks up, clearly annoyed by the interruption. The aide stands his ground, knowing he has to do his job. Conrad mentions the upcoming Holy Night Festival, which gets a reaction out of Nathan. The Emperor's eyes narrow as he thinks about all the noisy nobles he'll have to deal with. He looks like he's about to snap, the mental noise getting to him already. Conrad gives a nervous smile, trying to lighten the mood. It doesn't work. Nathan is fuming, his patience wearing thin. Arianel suddenly appears in his thoughts, looking as professional as ever. Nathan looks at a report, his brow furrowed in deep thought. He imagines Arianel and him together, and it actually makes him pause. He remembers the moment they almost kissed, and his face goes totally cold. Nathan is feeling the weight of his duties as a father and emperor, his mind racing. Nathan gazes out the window, lost in thought. His mind drifts to a vision of Arianel and him, a stark contrast to his usual cold demeanor. Nathan is sitting at his desk, and Conrad is beside him, looking a bit concerned about the emperor's state of mind. The imperial palace stands tall under the night sky, a place full of secrets and silent struggles. The door to Nathan's room creaks open just a bit, and a soft glow spills out. Nathan stands there, half-dressed and drying his hair, looking like he's just finished a long day. A hand reaches out to steady the door, the presence of someone else felt in the room. Arianel enters, carrying a small basket, and stops in her tracks when she sees Nathan. Nathan turns toward her, his expression unreadable but his presence commanding as always. Arianel looks down, a bit flustered to see the Emperor in such a vulnerable state. The two of them stand in the quiet hallway, the tension between them almost palpable. Arianel tries to keep her composure, reminding herself of her role and her mission. Nathan's shirt is open, showing off his well-built physique and making Arianel even more flustered. She quickly covers her eyes, her face turning a bright shade of red. She peeks through her fingers, unable to completely look away from the Emperor's impressive form. Arianel takes a deep breath and approaches him, a measuring tape in her hand. She starts to measure his chest, her hands trembling slightly as she gets close to him. Her face is right next to his chest, and she can feel the heat radiating from him. Nathan looks down at her, his gaze intense as she continues her work. Arianel stretches her arms out to measure his shoulders, the physical proximity making her heart race. Nathan's red eyes watch her every move, making her feel even more self-conscious. Arianel is so focused on the task that she doesn't notice how close she's standing to him. She measures his arm length next, her professional side momentarily taking over her embarrassment. She looks up at him with a determined expression, ready to finish the job. Arianel imagines herself with a pair of scissors, ready to tackle any challenge that comes her way. She clasps her hands together, a look of excitement and anticipation on her face. Nathan looks a bit taken aback by her sudden change in energy. Arianel sighs, her thoughts returning to the reality of her situation. She envisions a happy future for Crystal, Nathan, and herself, a family united and strong. Nathan looks away, perhaps thinking about the same future or something entirely different. Arianel is shocked by her own thoughts, her face flushing once again. She turns and runs away, her long braid trailing behind her as she escapes the awkward situation. Nathan sits on the edge of the bed, watching her flee with a confused look on his face. Arianel stops and looks back, her expression a mix of embarrassment and realization. The two of them share a quiet moment, the air filled with unspoken thoughts and feelings. Nathan stands up, his presence filling the room once again as he faces Arianel. Arianel looks at him, her eyes reflecting the complex emotions she's feeling. Nathan reaches out to her, his hand moving toward her hair in a gentle gesture. Arianel watches him, her heart pounding in her chest as she waits to see what he'll do. She closes her eyes, a look of pure joy and contentment on her face as she imagines a future with him. Nathan sits quietly as Arianel tends to his hair. The two of them lost in their own thoughts. Crystal is ecstatic, her hands raised in triumph as she celebrates Arianel's work. Nathan's sharp red eye narrows as he silently observes the joyful scene unfolding before him. Arianel finishes styling Nathan's hair, looking down at him with a gentle, satisfied smile. Arianel gestures animatedly as she speaks, her passion for her craft shining through in every word. Nathan remains silent, his expression unreadable as he listens to her enthusiastic plans. Arianel heads out, stopping to speak with a maid who is waiting patiently near the doorway. She gives a few final directions, the maid listening attentively with a respectful bow. Nathan strides through the hall, with the spirit Rue trailing after him with a playful, mischievous glint in its eyes. Arianel's frustration grows as Rue continues to pester her, while Nathan watches the exchange with a calm demeanor. She lets out a small gasp when Rue suddenly zips toward her face, catching her off guard. In an instant, Nathan catches her, pulling her firmly onto his lap to steady her. Arianel is frozen in shock, her heart racing at the sudden and unexpected physical contact with the Emperor. They sit together in a tense embrace, Nathan's powerful presence completely overwhelming Arianel's senses. Rue floats nearby, its tiny face twisted into a devious, mocking grin as it watches them. The spirit's teasing laughter is almost more than Arianel can handle in her current state. Nathan's hand grips her wrist gently but firmly, preventing her from hiding her burning face. Arianel's eyes widen as she takes in the sheer intensity of his gaze from such a short distance. He pulls her even nearer, their breaths mingling in the quiet, charged atmosphere of the room. Arianel can feel her face heating up, her pulse thumping wildly as she stares at him in stunned, blushing silence. Nathan leans in close, his face just inches from Arianel's. He pins her down, the tension between them reaching a breaking point. He pulls back slightly, looking frustrated as he reads her thoughts. Arianel is completely flustered, her face flushing a deep red. They're stuck in this awkward position, neither one moving an inch. Nathan's hand moves, catching her off guard. Her eyes go wide as she realizes just how close they are. She sits up, breathless and trying to fix her disheveled dress. Nathan looks just as rattled, leaning away while he tries to compose himself. He stands up and rubs his face, clearly annoyed with the whole situation. Nathan retreats to the edge of the bed to put some distance between them. Arianel stays on the floor, looking up at the grumpy Emperor. She stares at him, trying to figure out his next move. Nathan snaps a command, probably to hide how embarrassed he is. Suddenly, a little glowing ball of light pops into existence right next to her. Nathan stands there with his robe open, looking like he's about to snap. Arianel just claps her hands, completely unbothered by the tyrant's glare. He shoots her a look over his shoulder, but she's already busy with the spirit, Rue. Nathan is clearly at his limit with the noise and the magic. They sit in a tense silence, while Rue makes itself at home on Arianel's head. Nathan reaches out his hand, his expression unreadable. He grabs her chin, forcing her to look him straight in the eye. He runs a thumb over her lip, searching for any sign of a lie. Then he just turns and walks away, leaving her sitting on the carpet. Arianel watches him go, finally letting out the breath she was holding. Nathan stops by the bed, giving her one last stern look. She shouts something back at him, refusing to let him have the last word. Nathan stomps through his massive chamber, heading for the bed. He grabs the edge of the sheets with a frustrated sigh. He flops face first onto the mattress, completely done with the night. Arianel stands by the bedside, looking down at the exhausted Emperor. Nathan lies there, his blonde hair a mess against the pillows. Meanwhile, the spirit Rue gets sealed into a magical artifact to keep it under control. Later on, everyone's gathered for tea, including Conrad and a very nervous maid. Nathan sits with his arms crossed, looking absolutely miserable, while Rue hovers nearby. The hamster spirit looks just as angry as its master. Crystal is having the time of her life, holding the glowing orb that used to be a terrifying spirit. Rue imagines itself as a buff, muscle-bound warrior, even if it's just a tiny fluff ball. Crystal's eyes sparkle as she finally gets a good look at her new pet. Arianel presents the little guy, happy to see the princess so excited. Crystal holds the fat hamster in her palms, looking at it with pure awe. Nathan just adjusts his sleeves, ready to get back to being a grumpy tyrant. Nathan marches off with Conrad and the staff trailing right behind him. In a sudden burst of energy, Rue the hamster spirit bites down on the Emperor's ankle. Nathan freezes mid-step, looking down with a mix of shock and pure annoyance. A hand reaches down to pick up the little troublemaker, giving it a good scolding. Arianel and Crystal sit at the table while Nathan looms nearby with his usual sour face. She can't help but let out a giggle at the spirit's blatant lack of respect for the tyrant. Conrad and the maid lean into gossip, glad to see a bit of life in the palace for once. Crystal holds Rue tightly, completely ignoring her father's grumpy presence. Arianel watches them with a soft smile, relieved that the spirit has finally calmed down. Far away in the Silva Kingdom, the morning sun glints off the domes of a grand cathedral. Ruby, Arianel's sister, sits in a plush chair, her mind already churning with schemes. She's joined by Archbishop Andre to discuss how to handle the Empress back home. Ruby takes a slow, calculated sip of her tea while listening to the bald man's plan. She envisions the original story's end, a world where Arianel is cast aside and broken. Andre gives her a sinister smile, his eyes filled with nothing but greed and ambition. Ruby's eyes widen as she hears a piece of information she can use to her advantage. The Archbishop leans in close, whispering his dark advice into the princess's ear. She looks back at him, her hands clasped together as they finalize their strategy. Ruby hides her true feelings behind her cup, playing the part of the perfect sister. She thinks back to when Arianel was just a child, begging for her help and getting none. A cold, triumphant smile spreads across her face as she plots her sister's downfall. The two of them continue their meeting, surrounded by the golden opulence of the church. Ruby's expression turns ice cold as she prepares to set her plan into motion. In this quiet room, a conspiracy is being born that could destroy everything Arianel has built. Back at the palace, the afternoon is much more peaceful as the ladies relax in the garden. Crystal is busy grooming Rue, treating the hamster like it's the most important thing in the world. Arianel takes a moment to herself, reviewing the documents while she enjoys her tea. The maids can't stop talking about how much better things are since she arrived. Arianel remembers the tragic end of the original novel, the ruined family she's trying to save. She quickly shakes off the dark thoughts, determined to change their fate. A massive yawn catches her off guard, the weight of the day finally hitting her. One of the maids stops to chat, but Arianel is clearly ready for a long nap. She leans her head on her hand, looking completely drained from all the palace drama. The maid shares a funny story, bringing a small smile back to Arianel's face. Nathan walks past with Conrad, looking as stiff and formal as he always does. He stops to talk to Arianel, and the air between them immediately gets awkward. She holds up her list of demands, ready to fight for better treatment for the staff. The maid hides a laugh behind her hand, watching the two of them bicker again. Nathan presents a plate of snacks, though his grumpy face suggests he's being forced. Crystal suddenly lets out a gasp, her eyes filling with tears as she holds Rue. Arianel and Nathan both panic, wondering what on earth could be wrong with the pet. It turns out, the little hamster was just sleeping so deeply that it looked like a fluffy ball. Crystal looks down at the sleeping Rue in her palms, a small brush in her hand. Nathan looks over at his daughter, his expression softening just a fraction. Arianel watches the father-daughter pair, satisfied that her plan is working. Nathan, however, still keeps his arms crossed. Nathan turns to look at Arianel, his face once again a mask of royal indifference. Arianel smiles warmly, her eyes closing as she takes in the peaceful moment. Conrad looks on from the side, a knowing look in his eyes as he adjusts his glasses. Nathan remains stoic. As the day winds down, Nathan and Conrad walk through the palace gardens, their shadows stretching long. Arianel stands in the middle of the room, looking resolute. She is determined to stay the course. Later that night, Nathan walks through the halls in his robe, passing by Arianel's room. She is seen through the doorway, looking over some notes. Crystal is happily eating, her face lighting up with every bite. Rue is perched on her shoulder. Nathan and Conrad come across the scene, Nathan looking slightly confused by his daughter's joy. Arianel is there too, looking a bit shocked. Arianel is clearly taken aback, her hand at her chest as she looks at Nathan. There's a glow around her as she thinks. Arianel approaches Nathan with her hands together, a pleading look on her face. Conrad watches from behind Nathan. Nathan gives her a half smile, his eyes gleaming with a hidden thought. He looks more handsome than ever. The reflection in the mirror shows Nathan sitting while Arianel stands behind him, preparing to do something. A small sparkles surround them. Arianel is ready, scissors in one hand and a comb in the other. Nathan sits patiently, wrapped in a blue cloth. Arianel is wearing an apron over her dress. Nathan looks forward, his expression blank. Above him, a small chibi Arianel is seen thinking hard. Another image of Nathan below shows him in formal attire. Arianel holds the scissors with a determined look, ready to give the Emperor a haircut. She is practically glowing with excitement. She carefully positions the scissors near Nathan's blonde hair, her focus intense. Arianel leans in, her hands steady as she begins to trim. Nathan sits perfectly still, his eyes fixed ahead. Onomatopoeia for the sound of scissors is seen. Arianel continues her work, her eyes narrowed in concentration. She is taking this job very seriously. Nathan is shown in a white formal shirt, looking regal and perhaps a bit impatient. A small chibi Arianel is shown at the bottom, looking happy. Arianel's hand is shown with the scissors, carefully trimming the hair at the back of Nathan's head. Arianel laughs brightly as she finishes, her eyes closed in joy. Nathan looks over his shoulder at her, a look of mild surprise on his face. Chibi versions of Arianel and Nathan are shown. Arianel looks shocked with wide eyes, and Nathan has a small blush on his cheeks. They are both incredibly cute. Nathan closes his eyes and touches his forehead, looking a bit overwhelmed or perhaps just tired. Arianel places the scissors on the table with a light click. Her hand is elegant as she sets them down. Nathan is shown through a translucent blue cloth, his expression soft and his eyes looking directly at the viewer. He looks incredibly handsome. Arianel is shown with a huge, bright smile, her arms open wide as if she's presenting something wonderful. She's practically glowing. A wide shot shows the room. Nathan is lying on a sofa while Arianel walks towards him from the foreground. The room is opulent and filled with light. Nathan is lying down with a white cloth over his eyes, looking very relaxed. Arianel is seen in the corner, looking at him. A close-up shows Arianel's hands as she carefully washes Nathan's blonde hair. Water is splashing around her fingers. Arianel leans over Nathan, her hands in his hair. A small pink heart is seen above her head, indicating her affection. Nathan still has the cloth over his eyes. Nathan sits up, drying his hair with the white cloth. He looks refreshed. Arianel is seen in a small inset, looking happy. Arianel is shown in a small inset, her face full of joy. She's wearing the same dress from earlier. A long vertical strip of panels shows the process. First, Arianel drying Nathan's hair. Then, a shot of her hands. Then, them standing together with a maid. Then, Arianel presenting him with a mirror. Then she asks him if he likes it, and he remains silent. Finally, she asks if he is satisfied, and then says it suits him well. Nathan responds with, "I see," and then tells her she must be tired and can leave now. Arianel is shown as a chibi, looking incredibly happy and proud of her work as she looks in the mirror. A maid is beside her, looking equally impressed. Arianel bows low, her face full of a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. The maid looks on, perhaps a bit worried. Arianel and the maid walk away together, Arianel's purple skirt swishing. They are leaving the room. A close-up of Nathan's face. He looks thoughtful, his red eyes looking off to the side. One of his hands is near his ear. He looks quite striking.